Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and MacLean podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and MacLean. We have another special summer guest. Our summer guest series, I would say this has been our best one ever. I'm just going to put that out there. And we've had some really good guests on. So if you've missed any of those, now's the time to catch up. We just had Bruce Feldman on. We had Tyler Fulgham. We did a women's basketball week with Sean Poppy and Megan Duffy and Olivia Miles. We've had Dan Radikovich and Whit Babcock on, Elle Duncan, so many big names, JD Piquel. And now as we get into July, by the way, happy July, everybody. That means football season is basically here. We're talking strictly college football, really diving into the nuts and bolts. And then we're going to start our season previews starting at the end of this month because the ACC now has so many teams. So we have to get a head start there. But as we said, it is July, which means this episode is coming out on July 1st, which means your girl's birthday is tomorrow. And you know where we're going to get everything we need for my birthday feast. That's at Ingles. I think we're going to do maybe some steaks, maybe a few days before, but my parents are in town and my mom is going to make me my favorite, my carrot cake. And she's getting all that she needs over at Ingles. Perfect for anything you need this summer. So make sure you go over there and check out Ingles for all of your needs. Today, we have a very special guest, and that's Andy Staples from On3. He is the college football guru for On3. We also had JD Piquel on, who's kind of his running mate. Andy does a daily show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. He's a super well-respected college football writer who was with Sports Illustrated for a long time, The Athletic, and then now at On3. And this conversation was really fun because a lot of people might not know that Andy was an offensive lineman at Florida. And, just looking at him, you wouldn't really think he was an offensive lineman, but he talks about that and playing for Steve Spurrier and his relationship with Steve Spurrier. And then, of course, we get into all things college football, thoughts on the playoff, thoughts on how many ACC teams can have kind of that realistic goal of making the playoff. That part was really interesting. So much to talk about with Andy Staples. We really appreciate his time. Let's get to a message from Ingles, and then we will dive in with Andy Staples.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
Staples, my brother, welcome to the show. It's so great to meet you. So great to see you. And you actually just took me way back. And I have to touch on this because it was incredible. I haven't heard anyone reference this 7-on-7 tournament in 14 years now. But you said we actually met way back in the day at this massive 7-on-7 tournament in Tuscaloosa. So you just took me way back, brother. Great to see you again.
It was wild because I see this big old dude from South Carolina. I'm like, holy crap, he is huge and he's playing tight end. This dude must destroy people. I wonder if he knows he's gonna get moved to offensive line when he gets
easy.
But it was an incredible try. So I was working for Sports Illustrated at the time. I was on the bus with the South Florida Express 7-on-7 team. So that's a team that had Teddy Bridgewater, Ryan Shazier, a couple guys who wound up playing at Louisville with Teddy, and then some other guys who Jeremy Cash, who was a very good player at Duke after he started out at Ohio State. But that was so much. I remember like DeAnthony Thomas was there, the Mamba. It was awesome.
Listen, when you have a high schooler nicknamed the Mamba, okay, something's a little different about that.
Snoop Dogg nicknamed the Mamba.
That's crazy. It's absolutely insane. KG, that tournament was nuts. It was the who's who. It was state versus state. Some teams had multiple teams there, but it was a lot of fun just to compete at that level in a place where Nick Saban's just walking around and he might come, pat you on the back and say, good job.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny that Andy brings up you moving to offensive line because I was thinking of making that joke too. But hey, it worked out very well for you, Max. So you can't be mad about it. But Andy, I've been following you and your work forever. I mean, you've done such a good job in the college football space, and I feel like you're kind of one of the main guys. So we're very excited to have you on. And you're with On3 now, and you talked about you're with Sports Illustrated. You've been at different places. What's it like to be with On3 now?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. I love working for a place that college football is the number one thing we do. We are branching out. We've got some college basketball. We just hired Talia Goodman, who's killing
I saw
it.
that.
Breaking
That's
news on the
awesome.
women's basketball beat. But we're really college sports focused, which is what I've covered for my entire career. Because like when I was a beat writer and when I was at SI, I covered football and basketball. So it was, and then you'd branch out into baseball every once in a while. So it's a lot of fun being in that environment, being on campuses. And I just think, the group we've put together is awesome. And I like being on the ground floor. Like when I started at The Athletic in 2019, it was a very young company as well. And the energy around kind of the young upstart company is a lot of fun for me because that's not what I was used to. I had worked for a couple of newspapers, then I'd worked for SI. So with all these things that had been established for, in the case of the newspapers, they'd been around for 100 years before I showed up, and SI had been around since 1954. But this is a totally different thing where you're trying to kind of create something from scratch, and we don't exactly know how it's going to go a year from now or what it's going to look like. But we know we can move and be flexible and see what the audience wants. And that's the interesting thing is college sports is changing so much. How you cover college sports has to change with it. And we've taken a lot of we've done a lot on NIL, a lot on the business side of this, which is where it's going. And now it's maybe NIL is going to change, but we've focused very hard on that and then tried to be a little more realistic about how things work now, because look, we're on the internet. We're aiming at people who are a little bit younger. We're not the people who are pining away for the days of amateurism. They're watching TV. Like they're not watching our YouTube videos.
And it's crazy to see that adjustment. And I mean, you were already kind of on that cutting edge before, obviously, but now it just feels like the I don't know, the freedom to do it. Is there something with that where you talked about, okay, let's figure this out and who knows what it looks like. That excitement to me is really cool. And having that flexibility, we love On3. I mean, all those guys over there do such an amazing job, and it's been so fun to watch that grow and blow up. I mean, I remember hearing the word and you're just like, what? The name, you're like, what is that? What? And now it's this monster. So
it's a snap count.
Yeah, it's
of course.
Right.
It's also the third one of these that Shannon Terry has created. So
everything he touches, baby, everything he touches turns to gold. But you're a year in almost, and right short of that. What I guess do you see it developing into when you talk about making the changes and things of that nature?
What I'm hoping it develops into is the number one place to go to get college sports news.
That's cool.
We're the people that you look to when something happens. You're like, I want to see what On3 has to say about this. Right. And we have a great team. I mean, even behind the scenes, we've got Jack Terry is the guy who runs our social media and does a lot of our search engine optimization stuff. And he's just incredible, like building our brand in a way that puts it out in front of people when they don't even realize it's being put out in front of them. We had moments like when the Kentucky basketball situation was happening, where if you typed in John Calipari, we were the first thing that came up.
Wow.
And that's because people were doing good stuff, writing good stuff, but also because we have people behind the scenes who are great at just positioning it in a way that it goes front and center in front of the most people. And that's the sort of thing that like the more legacy companies I worked for, SI, the newspapers, they never quite figured that out. The Athletic was really good at that too. That was something that was a priority for them, and they were great at that. And I just think, part of this is it goes back to I was the Florida beat writer for the Tampa Tribune in 2007, and my wife goes, "Why don't you work for one of those internet companies? Like, you guys print the news once a day on dead trees. Do you think that's actually a sustainable business model in an era when like we can send an email to China in less than a second?" Like, you may have a point there. And so I sent off applications to pretty much every national website at that point. Like, hey, I cover college sports. Would you maybe be interested? And I'm so glad that she pushed me to do that, because it was what I needed. And I'm kind of a techie gadget guy. So I'm always looking at what's next. Like I remember when I was at SI, like sending an email to one of my bosses saying, "Hey, our site doesn't look great on a phone. Is there anything we can do about that?" And getting an email back, it's like, we find that only like 5% of our traffic's from phones. I was like,
how crazy is that to think about?
Yeah.
That's nuts. That's nuts. Wow.
Different world. And shout out to your wife. She
Big
obviously
shout.
knew
She's
what
the
was
best.
up. Yeah, she
Genius.
knew what was going on. Okay, so you mentioned you were covering Florida. Let's go back, Andy, because like I said, I've seen your stuff, for a long time. I didn't know you played at Florida. Maybe I just missed that, or you walked
play
on.
is a relative
You
term, and
walked
this is
on.
why
No, come on.
this is why I can make fun of Eric McLean about knowing he's going to get moved to offensive line, because I'm sure you can tell from my giant size that I was an offensive lineman. Let me tell you guys, when you're a 240-pound offensive lineman, you're not very effective at the college level. So I make the team at Florida. Like, I got recruited by back then we called it 1AA. It's the FCS now. I got recruited by some of those schools. I got recruited by the Ivy League schools that had pretty good grades, service academies. But my thing was because I had good grades, I had a chance to go to Florida basically for free on an academic scholarship. And I grew up in suburban Orlando. And so my thought was, I already knew I wanted to be a sports writer. So I figure I'm going to work for a newspaper my whole life. I'm never going to make more than $40,000 a year. So I can't be taking out loans.
Smart.
Like, I can't take out loans to go to Princeton. I can't take out loans to go to Duke. Like, I need to go somewhere where it's going to be free. And so I went to Florida, and I was like, well, Duke had asked me to walk on. These 1AA schools had offered, either spots on the team or scholarships. Why don't I just try out for the team? I thought I was good enough to be a scholarship guy at one of these places anyway. So I do the tryout. I make the team. I get out there the first day. And within about 5 seconds, I realize this is why they didn't recruit me. Like, I walked through the gates of the practice field. Javon Curse is standing there with his shirt off. I'm like, I'm not even from the same planet as this person. Like, and I'm like, does everybody look like this?
Right.
Like, if one more person who looked like Javon Curse had walked through the gate at that point, I would have just left.
Well, okay. So speaking of that, you did play though. You have to give yourself credit. I mean, I know you did those conditioning drills.
Human tackling dummy. Yeah, that's it's
Whatever
fine.
It
I'll take
Whatever
it.
it takes.
You got the gear. But Steve Spurrier was your head coach. So you've got to give us like one or two stories from the old ball coach down there.
Andy, here's the deal, Andy,
Well,
Give us some.
he
Give
didn't
us
have much
some.
to do with me as a player because I was clearly of zero importance to the team. I remember one time I got yanked out of one of the young guys' scrimmages because I'd given up yet another sack, and I'm ripping my chin strap off, and he's like, that's why we practice. And I'm sure he turned around to Jimmy Ray Stevens, the offensive line coach, like, never put that kid in again. but then let's see. Sugar Bowl, my freshman year, there's a bunch of us in the elevator. I think we're all walk-ons in the elevator. And coach gets on with us, and a couple of us wearing hats. And you did.
Ooh,
That's how boys, we don't wear hats in the building. So, those are my interactions with Steve Spurrier as a player. But it's funny because he was very proud that one of his walk-ons wound up writing for Sports Illustrated, and that he got to listen to him on Sirius XM and watch him on Feinbaum. And so, when I was at SI, I went to do a South Carolina story one day, and we're doing the scrum after practice where Coach Spurrier meets with the local media. And Joe Person, who I ended up working with at the Athletic, he covers the Panthers for the Athletic now. He was covering South Carolina football for the state newspaper. Joe's a great reporter. Also was a good football player. He was an H-back at William & Mary. And so Spurrier, never missing an opportunity to needle someone, goes, "Hey, Joe, this is one of my walk-ons. He writes for Sports Illustrated right now. When are you going to write for Sports Illustrated?"
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, stop. Because I love Joe, and he's awesome. And I'm like, don't stop this. I have nothing to do with this. But no, it's and I see Coach Spurrier all the time. He lives in Gainesville now. He's got a restaurant in Gainesville now, which is fantastic. The Sunday brunch there is unreal. But we see him around. We see his wife Jerry, who is a national treasure. I love him because there is no filter. There's no BS. He will tell you exactly how he feels about everything.
Yeah.
And there just aren't many people in the world like that anymore. And look, if I'd have been a quarterback or receiver trying to play for him, I would have hated that.
Sure.
But he was the good cop for everybody else. Like, that's the part. And Eric, I'm sure at Clemson, you guys had this where certain coaches were the good cops and certain coaches were the bad cops.
That's right.
So Steve Spurrier was absolutely the good cop for everybody who wasn't a quarterback or receiver. And he had the way he'd blow the whistle at the end of practice. If you heard that tweet, it means practice is over. And so, like, Bob Stoops is a defensive coordinator, and I'm on the scout team playing as the first team defense. So I'm on that field, and they're just screaming at us and just killing us and Mayday, Mayday, which is, rerun that play you just ran because we messed it up. And you could look over at the offensive practice field at a certain point in practice. Like, if you were past the 1 hour and 45-minute mark of practice, you would start looking over at the offensive practice field, because I still need to ask Coach about this, because I don't think I've ever gotten it confirmed, but I'm pretty sure he's very superstitious. Like, you know how you can't walk off a basketball court without making a shot?
Right.
Like, I swear they didn't end practice unless they hit some sort of bomb. And so if you had passed the hour and 45-minute mark of practice, you would start looking over at the offensive practice field. And if you saw a ball in the air, you were like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. And if the guy caught it, you're like, yes. Because the next thing you'd hear is tweet, 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 tweet. And then you'd hear the defensive coaches all we're gone. The head ball coach has spoken.
That's amazing. And he runs it all, man. That head coach, he has the power. He has the power. I love that, man. Well, that year in particular just had to be nuts. And one kind of point I want to look at that year was you guys play FSU, nail biter, game days there. You lose. And I'm sure at the time it felt like the season was over, like, because there was just a different time. No playoff.
It did. I will tell you, I had a message on my answering machine from one of my buddies from high school when I got back from Tallahassee from that game. And it is laying out all the different things that would have to happen for Florida to then be competing for the national title again. And I remember I hit stop. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way.
Guess what? They all have. Was he right? Did he get literally all of them?
He got it all right. It was crazy. Like, so so the following Monday, we were practicing for the SEC championship game against Alabama. And I remember going out to practice, or before practice, we're starting to get warmed up and stretched out. And I see Wiley Rich, the starting center, doing shotgun snaps. And for those who don't remember, Steve Spurrier was pretty vehemently anti-shotgun. He felt like it took away a lot of your play action stuff, and he just wasn't interested in it. But in that game, I believe Mo Collins and Zach Pillar were out. Both starting offensive tackles were out. Like, Cooper Carlisle, who ended up playing like 12 years in the NFL, was playing in that first Florida State game.
I was going to say, wait, Andy, it wasn't your time then?
No. So
Andy,
many people would have had to have come down with food poisoning for me to be considered. But no, I mean, so like Cooper was a redshirt freshman at the time, and FSU had these monsters. Raynard Wilson, Andre Wadsworth, like monsters on their defensive line. And so Danny Werfel got hit a lot. And Spurrier had said, hey, he told us in a meeting, like, I'm going to make a big stink in the media about the late hits, but like the offensive line needs to block. But he also decided, okay, maybe I want to bend on this shotgun thing. Maybe I'm willing to operate out of the shotgun more. And so Wiley started doing a lot of shotgun snapping. They started, I have to go back to that SEC championship game. I can't remember that they used it that much against Alabama, because they didn't really need it.
Right.
But before the Sugar Bowl, before playing Florida State, because remember, Texas had to beat Nebraska. That happened. Then you get to New Orleans. We're practicing for the Sugar Bowl. Needed Ohio State to beat Arizona State, because Arizona State was still undefeated. That happened in the Rose Bowl. And yeah, the on the offensive practice field, they were working out of the shotgun a ton.
Wow.
And they get to the game, and Danny Werfel's in the shotgun. The starting offensive tackles are back, and FSU never touches him.
Jeez.
And he's just picking them apart. And also, the Ike Hilliard, still the greatest move I've ever seen a receiver make. I've never seen a defender just crumple to the ground like the way Ike Hilliard made that guy do in the Sugar Bowl.
That's insane. And I mean, so to set the stage even further, you lose by 3, you somehow get there, and you guys win by 32 points. I mean, was literally the biggest adjustment just the shotgun there, and you guys fun and gun, get the ball out, or what? I mean, something else had to happen. There's no way shotgun's worth 32 points.
I think the defense played just out of its mind.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, like, I
Who
don't
was
remember
the quarterback for them? Was that
Thad Busby.
I don't even know who that is. So there you go.
But they had Warwick done. They had Peter Warwick had been unstoppable in the first game.
Right.
And I think what it really was, like, the defense played out of its mind in that game. And because I can't remember what day the game was on, but whatever the version of Tuesday practice was, if you would have asked me after that Tuesday practice, I'd have been, we're going to lose this game by 50.
No,
because we were our scout team offense was killing the defense, like just gashing them. And we're like, what is going on here? But then it did get quite a bit better the next couple practices, and you felt like, okay, feel pretty good about this.
Jeez.
And I thought with the shotgun and with the tackles playing, I thought it was going to be a very different game between Florida State's defense and our offense. Like I was fairly certain that it would look very different at that point. And and Danny had time to throw, and that was really it. And also shout out Robbie Stevenson, the punter, who had an 87-yard punt early in that game.
That's what we like. It's for the brand.
Wow. Okay, well, this is why you play the games, right? This is why you let it all happen on the field. Andy, I'm going to go a bit off script. We have, some questions we want to ask you written down, but you've got me thinking here, because obviously we have 2 big Florida programs in the ACC, in Florida State and Miami. You, as a Florida alum, you know Florida really well. What's happened to Florida football? Because it used to, late 90s, really 90s, early 2000s, even up to, Tim Tebow, and then Florida State still winning one in 2013. Like, it was elite. In Miami, we know they've fallen off. Do you feel like there's something specific that's happened? Have other teams recruited Florida better? I know Florida State obviously had a much better year this past year, but what do you make of the state of Florida with that?
Well, I think everybody else figured out how good players in Florida were. Like, if you look at rosters from the 90s, everybody just kind of stuck to their own geographic region.
Yeah.
Like the Florida State, Miami teams, Miami would go, they had their pockets. Like, they'd go to California, get a quarterback. They had those good Canadian offensive linemen for a minute there in the late 90s, early 2000s. But for the most part, Florida State, Miami were getting most of their talent from the state of Florida or from South Georgia. And Alabama got most of its talent from, Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi, like bordering states. It's not like that anymore. Now everybody just goes and gets the best players. Like, think of the run Alabama had with Florida receivers.
Yeah.
With,
and Clemson.
Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy. There was always somebody coming out of the state of Florida. Like, they did so great with South Florida receivers at Alabama. It felt like Calvin Ridley is another one. And now Jeremiah Smith, a South Florida receiver, going to Ohio State. I'm telling you right now, he's as advertised. Like, he may be the best receiver in the country as a true freshman.
Oh my gosh.
At Ohio State. Like, so you notice none of those guys are going to Florida State or Miami.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think Miami is weirdly, probably as of late, done the better job of recruiting Florida. But it's just a matter when you think of like Reuben Bain and guys like that. But we'll see if Miami's able to come back. And we'll get to that. We're going to do some state of the program stuff with you in some of these ACC schools. But you talk about finishing up at Florida. You knew you wanted to be a sports writer. So give us like the kind of 10,000 foot story here of graduation to where you are now.
Well, a lot of it happened during, because I had to leave the football team to work for the school paper because they wouldn't let me cover sports.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the thing was, back then, you had to have reps to get a job. Like you had to have stories written, experience to get a job. Now I would have just started a blog. I would have had my own podcast. I would have stayed on the team. And that actually would have been more valuable and would have helped me get a job. But back then, you didn't have a choice. Like, so I go to work for the school paper. I cover gymnastics. I cover a couple other things. Trust me, I can break down some SEC gymnastics. So, but you start covering football, and at the time, the professional papers in the state, they all had beat writers, but the appetite for Florida football was such that the beat writers couldn't be in 8 places at once. So you got plenty of work. Like I worked for the Orlando Sentinel, helping out their beat writer. And I also worked for the Tallahassee Democrat, which didn't have a beat writer, which essentially made me their beat writer at the time. And so I'm getting paid like $30 a story by them, which was great money back when you could get a keg for $36. And it was a lot of fun, and it was very good experience that I would have never gotten a job without. And so I still didn't get a full-time job right out of college. I ended up as a freelancer for the Tampa Tribune that first summer because I was still trying to find a full-time job. I had some leads, I had interned at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I had interned at Florida Today in Melbourne, and I had some leads on some jobs, but they didn't quite work out. And then finally, Labor Day weekend, I get a call from the sports editor of the Chattanooga Times Free Press. I had applied for their job covering University of Tennessee sports that June. And he calls and he says, well, we've offered this job to a few people and they've said no. And so we're down to you. I'm like, oh, great, I'll take it.
Love it.
And so every time I see a coach do that, well, I wasn't my wife's first choice either. I'm like, yeah, dude, I actually know the 6 people who turned down the job before I got it. So
that's amazing, man. And it led to obvious great success and everywhere in between to where you are now. You've referenced it all throughout this thing. And I think what's so fascinating about it is, you've been working in sports in a very transitional time. Like you played in it. Then the BCS comes around, then, obviously the college football playoff. And now we're at this expanded, CFP where there's multiple things, multiple deals. You guys surely would have, been squaring the playoff, losing that one game and not even thought twice about it. How do you feel about where we are in this expanded playoff? Does it need to be bigger? Are you excited about it? Because this is the first year and we're going to see, all the kind of kinks and whatever works out, whatever doesn't work.
I'm excited about the 12. I like the whole idea of switching to 14 without actually playing 12. Right. Why? Like, let's see what this looks like. Maybe this is perfect. Maybe this is the number. But I do like this because I do think this is going to make some of those regular season games in November just absolute bangers where we would not have thought about them much. And across the country, it sort of interconnects things because you're going to be, if you're an SEC fan or an ACC fan, you're going to be interested in what happens in the Big 12 because you want to know who's coming out of the Big 12 to make the playoff. You also want to know, like, does the Big 12 have an at-large team? Or could my league or my team be that other at-large team that comes out? So I think there's so much more drama to be packed into the back end of the season and so many more relevant games. I mean, I was thinking about, we're doing a thing on the show right now where we go conference by conference. We do the floor and the ceiling for every team. We just did SEC. The next one's Big 10. We're going to do Big 12 and ACC as well. And I was thinking about the ACC recently, and I was like, okay, how many teams can I say the ceiling is a playoff berth? I'm like, you know what? I could definitely do 3, probably 4, maybe 5.
Sure.
How many ACC teams in the 4-team playoff era would have said we have a legitimate shot at the playoff? 2.
Right.
Usually.
Right. And a lot of times 1. Just because that's kind of how dominant they were, Clemson in that time and things of that nature, KG. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that we talk about D-value in the regular season, but maybe this does add value in a different way. Let's get to what we referenced earlier, Andy, and some of this ACC state of the program for some of these big brands. And just give us like your 30-second thoughts. on where the program is right now and perhaps what we can expect in 2024. So let's start with the defending ACC champs, probably your favorite, the Florida State Seminoles. What do you make of FSU?
I actually love what Mike Norvell's done there, because I remember what it was like when Willie Taggart got fired. I remember the hole he had to get them out of.
Yeah.
The job he's done there has been amazing. And what I'm fascinated by this year is, so you lose Jordan Travis, which I don't think people appreciated how consistent, steady a hand on the wheel Jordan Travis was. You bring in DJU FSU, it's going to look very different because, no Keon Coleman, no Braden Fisk, no Jared Burse. And those were all transfers, but they were all transfers who made massive impacts on the team. This is going to look very different, but I feel like Mike Norvell has earned the benefit of the doubt from us in terms of selecting people out of the transfer portal. And it looks like the tack is different now. Like for a while there, it looked like he was really good at rating South Carolina's roster. Like fantastic. Like Jamie Robinson, Jaheim Bell, was great at that. Well, now he's rating Georgia and Alabama's rosters. And are these guys that were going to start at Georgia or Alabama? Maybe not. Are these guys that would have been the first guy in if somebody goes down at Georgia or Alabama? Yep. That's who they are.
Right.
And if they develop, because these are also guys that have multiple years of eligibility left. So they could develop into being a player who is as good or better as that person who is starting over them in Alabama or Georgia. I think that gives Florida State some good runway. I also think they've used their success in the transfer portal to improve what they get out of high schools. This class of 2024 was the most top 200 players they've had since the Jimbo Fisher era.
Right. And I think it's something the way that they do it to kind of complement now, that's where you wanted to get. It's hard to do something so heavy one way for so long, and it's going to be interesting to see with them. Talk to me a little bit about DJU and what you think with that and fit or whatever, because kind of what you said there, benefit of the doubt. When it first happened, man, I was like, I don't like this. He's not Jordan Travis. But then I have to remind myself, it's Mike Norvell. Like, that dude is an offensive genius. He's not going to ask DJ to do Jordan Travis things. He's going to ask him to do DJ things and try to make it better. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you like it? Do you not like it? Whatever.
I like it. I was the same as you. Because remember, they were going to have Cam Ward and DJ come on the same weekend.
Right.
And DJ went there without an offer, which in this era of the transfer portal is virtually unheard of.
Yeah.
But I think they were kind of testing one another. DJ was testing them and they were testing DJ. And I got to say, I went up to Tallahassee a couple months ago and talked to DJ and talked to some of the other players. He seems to fit so well there. It is, I know he's a guy that people like, and I knew that from Clemson and from Oregon State, but he really seems to click very well with this particular group. Norvell seems to click well with him. And here's the thing I will say about Norvell, and there's a few coaches that I think this particular year it's going to be a little bit different with them because of one rule change. The rule change that allows the coach to talk to the quarterback in the helmet. Dude. If you are Mike Norvell, if you are Lane Kiffin, if you are Hugh Freeze, that makes your offense better instantly.
Yes.
If you are one of those play calling guys, and it doesn't have to be the head coach, because it's going to be whoever the play caller is going to be in the guy's ear. But if you are a play caller who can see the matrix from the sideline, which these guys are, it will change everything for your offense.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't.
Phenomenal
And that's
point.
a piece that people are really not thinking enough about, I feel like, right now. And it's early. Listen, we're recording this in May. We got a long time. But, Kelly, I think that is going to be a massive separator, because you're also going to have the other side where people are too frantic, looking at too much and trying to over communicate. And guys are going to throw picks. I mean, guys are going to put the ball in horrible places because they're overthinking, because they got voices literally in their head.
I hear voices. Yeah, exactly. So that brings us to our next team here, Andy, and that's Clemson. Do you feel like where Clemson is right now when it comes to 2024, it's very much if the quarterback position can be somewhat close to what it has been, then it can be a game changer. Does it come down to Cade, in your opinion?
No, I don't. I think it comes down to the receivers and Cade and the offensive line. And I'm going to say what I say every time when it comes to Clemson. Just take a couple people out of the portal. Just a couple. One impact receiver, one offensive lineman at a key spot. Like, just a couple. You don't have to do what Florida State's doing. I understand why you don't want to mess with your culture and your continuity. But the reason you're not as good anymore is because you don't fix the things that you can fix immediately, and other schools fix them more efficiently than you. So that's my concern. I don't know that they ever get back to national title contention unless they are willing to build their roster the way everybody else is. And it doesn't, you don't have to go to an extreme. Because I would argue that Kirby Smart at Georgia is not overly reliant on the transfer portal. But when they need somebody, like they lose Brock Bowers, they go get Benjamin Urosic from Stanford, who looks the most like Brock Bowers of anybody who played last year. Like, there's no shame in that. It's not dirty. It's not against the rules. Like, everybody is doing that, and you don't have to do it to an extreme. Because I agree with Dabo when he says the way Clemson recruits is special. It leads to a certain culture. It leads to a certain ability to develop players better. He's right. It doesn't mean you can't find 2 or 3 players a year who will fit into that culture and who will help you at positions of need immediately.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, just to see how does that evolve, how does that change? Because, I think you're right. It's just one of those things where people are getting more talented quicker and not having to rely on development when you bring somebody out of high school. I mean, these are guys that are proven, ready to go right now. How about on the defensive side for the Tigers? I mean, loaded, a lot of young guys that are now, going to be sophomores and playing at a high level. And even, a guy like Sammy Brown, who I know you guys had really high on your boards there. I expect that to be a top 5 defense at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Sammy Brown was one of those, even before he committed to Clemson, where you're like, this is a Clemson player right here. This dude's going to Clemson. Like, he's from Georgia. He's really good. He just sort of fits that mold. Like, but then Peter Woods is another one who's just fantastic. The next great Clemson D lineman. And yeah, this is where the good stuff is with that, the way they recruit. Like, this is where you get guys who buy in, who fit perfectly. And so, yeah, I'm very curious to see Clemson against Georgia right off the bat. How does that defense stand up? I don't know that Clemson's going to be able to score enough on Georgia to beat them. But if that defense can hold up against Georgia's offense, there's nobody else on that schedule that's going to scare them.
Right.
That's going to be fascinating. And I guess my biggest fear is just like, do you waste another defense? Like, do you waste another great defense and not being able to do enough offensively?
It's a legitimate fear.
Yeah, I know, Andy. It keeps me up at night. Okay, let's talk about Miami. Cam Ward. Cam Ward is now a Miami Hurricane, plus all the young talent they have down there. We mentioned Ruben Bain earlier. It could, I'm going to whisper this. Could Miami be back?
Maybe.
Yeah, I know. I never believe it.
Why? See, and that's the thing. Like, I've seen Mario build a roster.
Yeah.
I saw Mario build a dynamite roster at Oregon. But you also have to get the on-field part of it right. And like the Georgia Tech game, you're talking about hearing voices.
Yeah.
Like, the voice in my head is me yelling at the TV, just kneel!
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
But, I mean, they have the roster to win the ACC, to make the playoff. They have the talent. It's all there. They just got Damian Martinez at a transfer portal, a very good running back from Oregon State.
Yeah.
You mix that with guys who are highly touted high school recruits that you took. Francis Malinois started last year at right tackle, did a good job. Samson Okunola, who was the other 5-star offensive lineman, he jumps into the starting lineup this year. Ruben Bain, we just mentioned, like, they've got those freshman D linemen who are very highly touted. Maybe some of them will be helpful along the defensive line this year. Restrepo, talk about homegrown guys who can make plays. Like, they've got dudes. They just have to put it all together. And I think that Florida game will be a really good test for them.
Sure.
Because they're going into Gainesville. They probably have a better roster than Florida. Like, they're probably more talented than Florida. But this is where you got to prove that you can get it done in a hostile environment, in the game day atmosphere, and win games like that.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
because really, with Miami's talent, 10-2 is a very feasible record this year.
Right.
Very feasible. But you have to not underachieve.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think the biggest difference is obviously having that dynamic as a person at quarterback, but also probably the bigger differentiator, and you mentioned two of the guys, is that offensive line is elite. I mean, those guys are big, nasty, and going to do their job to a T. We'll speed up on these last ones here and get you out of here, Andy. Very grateful for your time. NC State's a team that really addressed a lot of needs in the portal. And you talk about ballers and established guys. They look the part to me, and I think they can make a real big jump. And I like, Noah Rogers coming home too there and being a guy that jumps off the page quickly. What are your thoughts on NC State?
So I had a conversation with Roddy Jones on my show, and I was pretty high on NC State already. But once Roddy got through with me, I was ready. I'm ready to buy long.
You're yelling, "Go Pack!"
on the Wolfpack. Because and the point he makes is just that with Grayson McCall coming in at quarterback, it gives them a dynamic that they have not had really since the next to last year of Devin Leary. Before Leary had the injuries, when Leary was really hitting on all cylinders, and we know the defense is going to be good. Yes, Peyton Wilson is gone, but they've lost really good players before on defense, and nothing changes. They continue to be good. Like keeping Tony Gibson around in Raleigh has been one of the big upsets. Like it makes them because the way he plays is a little bit different. It's a feast or famine. He's sending a bunch or he's dropping a bunch, and you never know which one that is. And he's great at disguising it. So I am very excited to see this team because like the Tennessee game for them is going to be a great litmus test because I think Tennessee is potentially a playoff team. Very deep defensive line. Nico at quarterback gives them a dynamic that they were very sorely missing last year where there'll be some improv. There'll be a lot more RPO stuff. But that defense at NC State, if they can shut that offense down, again, like what they're going to see going forward isn't going to be much scarier than that. Yeah. They're going to be able to play with everybody they have on the schedule.
All right, last one for me, Andy, and this is the fan base that probably you could argue deserves a good year the most, and that's Virginia Tech. They're excited. Oh. They're excited, and they from their start last year to their finish. I mean, when that September, I thought, oh gosh, like we might not see a bowl game, and then a great finish. Kyron Drones, just the pieces they return. Virginia Tech, like, are we talking perhaps sniffing the playoff? Are they one of the teams you had that could possibly hit that point?
I don't see them as a potential playoff team. Okay. But I do see them being much better.
Let's calm down is what you're telling me. Okay.
Yeah, let's not go crazy. But I think, like Tyler Bowen, very young as a play caller. Very new at this. He was the tight ends coach for the Jaguars, and he gets hired when Brent Pry comes in to be the OC. I think you saw not only Kyron Drones develop last year, but you saw Tyler Bowen develop as a play caller.
Right.
They look like a completely different team offensively second half of the season versus first half of the season. Now, they'll start out against Vanderbilt, which, Vanderbilt got New Mexico State's quarterback. Remember that dude, Pavia, who was he's just magic. So, like, it's a sneaky good opener to kind of test you out. It'll be fun. But I think Virginia Tech could be very good this year, and they need to be that. Like they have, like you said, Kelly, they've suffered mightily over these last few years, and I was very worried about Brent Pry midway through last season. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. But you saw it turn. People really do seem to enjoy playing for this group. And Drones, I saw Kyron Drones when he was a freshman at Baylor. At one of their practices, and like, this dude can sling it.
Yeah,
he's an athlete who can sling it.
Yeah.
So now that it feels like they've unlocked what he can do, I don't know that I go too crazy on the playoff, but like 8-win Virginia Tech,
sure,
that doesn't sound far fetched at all.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I think, Kyron, if he can get that intermediate game going, look out, because they can really unlock all those receivers they have coming back. Number one production in FBS. It's going to be fun. Not as fun as this, though, man. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate your insight. It was awesome learning more about your story and having you on today, brother. We really are grateful for your time.
My pleasure. And man, I just wish they'd thrown you some passes at Clemson, because I've seen it in action.
Me too.
It's a beautiful play.
Thanks again to Andy Staples for joining us here on the podcast. Make sure you guys are following everything that On3 is doing, following him on Twitter at Andy_Staples. He's a big deal. If you listen to our podcast and you like college football, you probably already follow him. But if you don't, go follow him. Make sure you do that and follow all of his great work. And we've got more coming at you next week. Our next 2 weeks are, I'll just say, probably it's fair to say, guys that are similar to Andy in terms of stature and knowledge and just overall, knowledge of the sport. So those 2 next weeks will be really exciting. Then summer kickoff, ACC kickoff, that's going to be great. And then, of course, we start with our season previews, which is just hard to believe. Mac and I have a lot of those kind of already ready to go with those interviews. So we got a lot going on this July. Happy July, everybody. And thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. That would really be helpful to us. Subscribe there, leave a comment. Let us know who else you want to hear from or which coach you're looking forward to hearing from. Also, rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But until next time, we'll see y'all.